they can make much more in the private sector. Most presidents take a pretty good pay cut to do that. Now, Clinton and Obama didn't this much because they were public servants. Clinton's are their wives made more than they did. Michelle Obama made a lot more money than Barack did. She had a very
What's her actual career?
She was actually a high level. She represented a big hospital in Chicago. I mean, she also went to Harvard Law School, and she made, I think, well over $1 million a year. She had a very good job.
Did you tell us last year that Clinton grew up poor?
Well, he grew up, I would say, lower middle class, but yeah.
Because my dad said that his mom was a CRNA. That's what my dad is. And
His mom was a nurse, but his mom also, I don't know that he was you mean like a nurse anesthetist?
yeah,
I don't know if that was the case.
that's just what he said.
She was a nurse, but not always.
That's what I thought.
She wasn't always a nurse. Also, she divorced a lot, and so they didn't always have two incomes.
Yeah.
And some of the husbands that she picked weren't always the biggest winners. In fact, Bill Clinton's original last name isn't Clinton. It's her second dad's last name. And he took on that last name. That same dad was emotionally and physically abusive. In fact, there is evidence that the dad got drunk and shot at him one time. There was actually bullet holes in the house. He did not grow up with an easy childhood. He was not dirt poor.
Okay, I thought
No, he was not dirt poor, but he did not grow up with a ton. A lot of it because of who she married and no, today nurse anesthetists do pretty well, but I don't know that that was the kind of nurse she was. But I can't speak to that. I don't know about that. All right, let's talk about John Quincy Adams. The one thing I do want to talk about him, though, in terms of what he did, actually relates to Jackson, and it's hysterical. Jackson's people wanted to try to obviously get him out of office. Okay, so what his people knew was that tariffs were a really big issue. Now let's review tariffs for a second. What part of the country does not like tariffs?
The South.
South. Why does the South not like tariffs? I'm going to raise your hand and tell me why the South does not like a tariff.
Because whenever we put tariffs on other countries, they have a tendency to put tariffs back on us in retaliation. So the South doesn't get as much money for selling their stuff, and they sell less of it.
Good. And what happened? Okay, so number one, because of retaliatory tariffs, that's good. Good little comments. Because of retaliatory tariffs, countries will not buy as much American stuff, oftentimes made in the South. And what happens to prices because of tariffs? Prices go up. Who are tariffs protecting traditionally? Domestic industry, right? And where was most of our domestic industry? In the North. So Southerners didn't like this, and the tariffs became a big issue. The West didn't really love this either. So what Jackson's people did was they proposed a tariff, a gigantic tariff, that became known as the Tariff of Abominations. We don't name stuff that great anymore. Like even Obamacare is not that radical, right?
Abomination.
Oh, right. Tariff of Abominations.
That was clever.
Like every time you say it, you had to go dun dun dun. This was a 45% tariff on incoming goods. Jackson's people, now remember, he represents the common poor guy. Jackson's people suggested this. And here was his theory. John Quincy Adams, if he vetoed this, who would he piss off?
The North.
He'd piss off the North, and he's already got the South not liking him anyway. And if he signed it, who would he never get a vote from?
The South.
The South and West, therefore he would lose. So the Jackson people thought, we're putting him into a great trap. If he vetoes this, he's gonna undercut his own people. And if he signs it, he's going to piss off almost the whole nation. And they thought there was no way he was going to sign this. Well, guess what he did?
He signed it.
He signed it. And the North now had a 45% tariff protecting their industry.
Wasn't it New England that was like, you know what, let's just have him sign it?
Well, that's he represented that's where he's from, is New England. He's from Massachusetts. And so this happens. This sort of blows up in Jackson's face in the sense that they didn't want the tariff, because he was not pro-tariff necessarily. But what does it do? It's going to get him elected, right? And Jackson's going to run in 28. We'll get that in a second. Now, does anyone know who John Quincy Adams' vice president was? Get whole milk if you know this. It's not easy. It's a man we've talked about already.
I read it in the chapter.
Was it Webster?
No, it was one of the great big three senators, one of the great triumvirate.
Caution, or Calhoun.
No, it was Calhoun.
Calhoun.
Yeah, Calhoun.
Right.
Hey, was the tariff on domestic goods
It was on goods coming into a country.
imported?
Yeah. And tariffs are all
I want
That's
to
what
so
I
much.
okay. That's
tariffs are all imported goods. Now,
sorry.
he wrote a letter that's become known as the South Carolina Exposition, saying that this tariff was unconstitutional and urging states to nullify it. What does this kind of sound like? A vice president writing something in secret, trying to get people to nullify a law?
Corruption.
No, we've heard this before.
Aaron Burr.
The Kentucky and Virginia resolutions, right? When Jefferson wrote that law against the Alien Sedition Act. Ironically, Calhoun's going to be the vice president under both John Quincy Adams and Andrew Jackson. He's also the only person to be vice president under two different people.
So he nullified this.
He did not nullify it, but he wrote this sort of open public note urging states to nullify this awful law. He was making the argument. Remember, does the South prefer states' rights or federal rights? States' rights. He was trying to compel the South to stand up against this federally aggressive law. Okay. Now, let's talk about the election of 1828. Who's going to be running in 1828? What two main candidates again? Jackson Adams.
Is Henry Clay run again?
Henry Clay will run against Jackson
In 32.
in 32. Adams ends up losing by quite a bit. Jackson becomes president. And what type of people do you think voted for Adams?
The Northerners.
Northerners and well, more wealthy type of people, highly educated people. Who was voting for Jackson?
Everybody else.
The common man, right? This is when the common man's coming around. That's what they call this, the Revolution of 1828. When we talk about the Revolution of 1800 was the first time that a peaceful country, democratic, elected a different government. The Revolution of 1828 is, now you've got freaking common men. Common men are voting in presidents. Dun, dun, dun.
Why did he win?
Because the common man.
Because he bought his vote.
Got the common man vote. He got the common man vote. The power, the shift of power is going from the elite to the common man, right? And there's all these new changes. Average people have more power. Andrew Jackson, he's the first president to be from where?
From not.
From the West,
The West.
right? No, from Massachusetts or Virginia. Do what?
He's from Tennessee, isn't he?
Well, yeah, which was the West. Well, actually, he was born in North Carolina, but yeah, he was represented Tennessee, right? That's the West at this point. He's from the West. He grew up poor. He was a general. He's a common man. He liked to duel. And he didn't just shoot over your head. He was shooting to kill you. He was a rugged man, right? He was a common man.
Did he beat somebody to death with his cane?
No, that's something different, and it wasn't to death.
Oh.
So the revolution.
Huh?
So, in fact, Andrew Jackson used to have this big giant block of cheese. This is not going to test, but just to let you know here. A big giant block of cheese, 1,200 pounds almost, in what today we would call the White House, the Executive Mansion. They didn't call it the White House until 1900 something. And that was it was symbolic because anybody could come into the executive office, knock on the door, take some cheese, and sit down with the president and discuss his issues. Right? He was a common man. When Jackson was elected, his inauguration was crazy. People from all around came in, like average people, to come to the executive office and see Jackson. And they had mud on their boots and crap on their boots, and these just regular common people going through the executive mansion, getting crap and dirt everywhere. They wouldn't leave. And finally, someone figured, how do we get these people out of the executive office? They started screaming there was free liquor on the yard, and everyone ran out. They locked the doors. Right? These are Jackson people. Right? Anderson County.
Oh my
We would
god.
be totally into Andrew Jackson, right? It would be a landslide.
The Revolution 1828 is like from the elite to the common man.
Yeah, we're moving to the common man, right? It was about brains and elite ruling us, and now it's going to be about the common man. And this is always a big debate that people have, and this is one of the things that oftentimes doesn't separate liberals from conservatives, but when Obama was running before, the first time he was running against McCain, it's hard to say McCain's an average guy. He was a fourth generation naval pilot, right? His family was pretty influential. Dad was an admiral. But when Sarah Palin was around, what was the thing about people loved about Sarah Palin? They liked her because she was kind of like one of them, right? She was an average person.
Alaska.
You know what I liked about Obama? He wasn't an average person. This kind of gets like, do we want average people running our country or not? Some people are like, yeah, we want the average guy in there who's looking out for the average American. Some of us are like, I don't want an average person there. This is the hardest job in the world. I want somebody smurfing smart, right? So now you're starting to get that. Well, where does the common man really fit in? Is it important to have a common man? Or is it important to have a sort of a guy who's really, or a woman who's really, really impressive? Maybe you can have both, right? I don't know, Bill Clinton was both. He was a common man, but he was also brilliant. But he also definitely had his faults, right? He was very human, right? He was popular in a place like Anderson County, too. Kind of like a brilliant redneck who liked, like chubby interns, right?
Ew. Was she even pretty?
Do what?
She wasn't even pretty.
She wasn't an ugly person. I mean, she wasn't like a runway model.
Yeah.
But she wasn't an ugly person.
I would say that.
She was really young for him. She was 21 and he was 46, 47. What am I
That's
looking
disgusting.
By the way, today I went to get a picture taken. They thought I was a senior in high school.
I bet you feel good.
Are you
Oh,
sure?
I about made out with that chick. I was so happy. I was so excited that someone thought I was like, really? 18? I love you, human. It was great. Okay, now some people hated Andrew Jackson, and we're going to get to a lot of that in a second. But I want to talk about his spoil system. What's the spoil system? Because this is a hugely important part of...
It's machine politics.
Okay, what is that?
I don't know.
Way to
Right.
Wasn't this where
Good
you
job,
like
Tristan.
replace
Way to read.
positions with his own men?
Spoil system is, you get me elected, I got you a government job. This happens a lot in eastern Kentucky, right? It's a very sort of corrupt way. Today we would see this as a corrupt way to do things. Jackson thought it was just making sense. You help me, I help you. Right? You help me get elected, I'm going to give you a good job. Machine politics is something even a little bit different. Machine politics is a little bit dirtier. You see this in big cities a lot. We'll say, who's going to be our political boss? We'll say Divine.
Me.
She seems to be kind of corrupt. All right. All right. Now, Divine.
Hey, you'll be
Yeah. Divine.